a proverb that says fall down 7 times, get up 8. And these little Darumas, they write themselves up. And so it's the same way. We're always going to fall down. We might have a goal and what we want to achieve, but we're going to fall down, but it's about how do you persevere and keep getting up and keep trying and keeping your eye on that goal, but also knowing that you may have to adjust and you may have to rethink about how, and persevere and fall down and learn from failure. So.
Hello, and welcome to Season 1, Episode 1 of the New England Lean Podcast. I'm Paul Critchley, President of New England Lean Consulting, and I'll be your host throughout this journey. When I was thinking about launching this podcast, I reached out to friends and colleagues to pick their brains on what I should focus on. There are already lots of business podcasts out there, as well as some really good ones that are lean focused. I didn't want it to be just another one of those, so I'm taking this in an entirely different direction. We built an amazingly diverse lineup of guests for Season 1. We have several award-winning authors of books that I know you have at least one of on your bookshelf. I get to chat with a former Navy SEAL and talk to him about leadership and teamwork. A university professor whose work I've looked up to for years, which is all about frontline engagement, leadership, idea generation, and capture. An organizational change expert who gave a TED Talk about the subject. There's a former finance executive who overcame unbelievable obstacles in a very difficult childhood, and he became wildly successful in the world of finance, only to alter his course mid-career. Now he's dedicating his life to helping managers and leaders lead from the heart versus just looking at a P&L statement to make their decisions. I'm also going to keep this regional, so I'm talking with New England business folks about what they're up to. Even though this was a conscious choice on my part, I'm willing to bet that the same issues they have are no different than the problems we all face, regardless of where we are geographically, except for the snow. We're going to keep that whether we want to or not. In our inaugural episode, my guest is Katie Anderson. Katie is an internationally recognized leadership coach, consultant, and professional speaker, best known for inspiring individuals and organizations to lead with intention. She founded her consulting practice in 2013 to work with leaders at all levels in organizations of all sizes to achieve higher levels of performance. She helps leaders to develop clarity of purpose and align their processes and behaviors in service of that purpose. In this episode, Katie and I talk about her new book, Learning to Lead, Leading to Learn, that she wrote with Mr. Yoshino. And we talk about what the authoring process was like. As we recorded this, we were basically smack dab in the middle of COVID-19. So we talked a lot about what that was like and should she even launch at this time. We also talk about how important storytelling is to the lean movement and the lean community and how each one of us feel that helps drive understanding and adoption. It was really an amazing interview and the perfect way to kick this whole adventure off. So give it a listen. I know you'll like it. Enough from me. Let's get on with the show. So welcome to the New England Lead Podcast. As I mentioned, our guest today is Katie Anderson. Katie, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. I'm happy to be here with you.
Thank you. It's good to see you. I mean, the last time we get to chat like face-to-face was in Chicago at the AME conference, and I was looking forward to seeing you again in Toronto, which obviously is not going to happen now because they've moved virtually. But I heard a rumor about you in Toronto. Do you want to share?
Well, sure. It's no longer in Toronto, as you know, but Mr. Yoshino, Asao Yoshino, the subject of my book, and I are going to be the keynote speakers on, I believe, the Wednesday of the conference. So I'm really excited for that. Of course, we were both looking forward to being part of the event when it was going to be in Toronto, but we're really thrilled that we're going to be able to share a conversational story and experience together with the AME conference goers. So that's really, really fun. And actually the news was made official today that we're recording this. So yeah, it's exciting.
So congrats.
Thank you.
So I'm bummed that we can't do it in person. I mean, this would have been, I think, my fifth year presenting at AME, and I was like, I love Toronto. I haven't been there in a long time, but I mean, it's beautiful. The CN Tower is so much fun. We could have gone to Blue Jays game, but right.
I
So
know.
obviously, it's like
Yeah.
added to the list of things we can't do this year.
I know. I have actually. I don't think I've ever been to Toronto, so I was really looking forward to that. And yes, I mean, what Mr. Yoshino and I had planned this whole book tour this summer and fall, Europe and the U.S. and then Canada in October, and that was one of my sort of it was a short dilemma in when sort of March hit and to whether or not I could go forward and publish in a pandemic. And I decided to move forward because you know what, I had to adjust my own feelings about, what a book release was going to look like. But I felt like Mr. Yoshino's stories and our the creation that we put together would just be out there and helpful, hopefully, to people in this time of challenge. So yes, but it's been definitely a adjustment in terms of expectations and plans and other things. But yeah.
And I have mine too. So
Yay!
so you don't think I'm right.
Thank
So
you.
congratulations. This is your first nonfiction, right? Book?
This is my first book. I have written 2 theses for graduate degrees, but this is my first book. So it's
Nice.
but I have to say it was way more work than doing either of my research theses in undergrad or graduate school. But hopefully reaching a much wider audience than either of those. So yes.
And this thing's got some heft to it. I mean, this is like no joke. This thing's like just over 300 pages.
It's 350 pages, of over 8,000 words. It is bigger than I intended when this started out, but also I made some changes in terms of how it was structured, and I really just wanted to be true to Mr. Yoshino's stories, and it needed to be as long as it needed to be. But I have to say, I'm definitely ready. I'm happy the book's out, but it was a lot of work, and but I'm really thrilled with how it came out. So
good, great. And I'll tell you, I haven't started reading it yet. I'm reading a book with my daughter for the summer, and we haven't quite gotten through that yet. But yours is next up. So
awesome. Well, I can't wait to hear what you think. And write a review on Amazon, please. I appreciate all those reviews. It helps spread the word.
I was going to say, I checked. You have 33 all 5-star reviews, and they're all for real. Because I know that's so congrats. I know you were like #1 in organizational change or development category, I think.
It's #1 new release, or it has been for coaching and mentoring, lean management, and then a little bit more obscure category, industrial and labor relations, or something along those lines as well. But I'd love you to help me get to my goal here of 50 reviews. So this little Daruma's, so when you've had a chance to read the book, I'd love your honest review, of course, as well.
I will. Yes, of course. And I only say if they're real because I know a mutual friend of ours, Mark Graben, he'll go off about, and he's right, because it bugs me too, that there's a lot of fake reviews and, people buy, I've seen even some lean practitioners, they're clearly not, they're bought and paid for reviews. And it's no, that's not cool. But like I said, I haven't read yours yet, but I'm so looking forward to it. And I'm trying hard not to, because it's all over. I mean, it's all over social media and LinkedIn. So I'm trying really hard. I want to like them, but I don't want to read any of the stuff because I don't want anybody to spoil anything. Because I know you've said before, there's a lot of stories and stuff, and I don't want to, I don't want to get to page 300, 298 and be like, oh, I knew that was going to happen.
Well, those are all stories, but they're real stories. So you will, yes. That's the intention of learning through real stories from Mr. Yoshino and really discovering some inner richness of history that led up to things that we sort of take for granted about lean thinking and practice, and how A3, it didn't just happen magically as this sort of communication tool. There was real intention put to it, and utilizing not just the framework of A3 thinking, but the process of mentorship and coaching, and as Mr. Yoshino says, 5S'ing your A3. So really sorting through the most important information. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you think. I just feel so fortunate that I met Mr. Yoshino 6 years ago, and got to have the privilege of spending time with him, and I was starting to hear his stories through our conversations and learn. And I just thought, other people need to hear these stories too. It's really my honor to have been able to partner with him to bring his experiences to a broader audience.
No, and I'm so glad that you did too. I mean, like I said, I can't wait to read this. And I think that, we were chatting a little bit before we got on. Lean is one of those things where it's like, you can look up 5S and A3s and it's like, I won't say it's not boring because it's all very important things. And it's stuff that, I'm sure like I teach every day. I'm sure you do too. But it's just, I like the story time. I like the stories better, especially when you hear people tell them and it's like, this actually happened one time and here's what happened. And oh, by the way, it didn't go perfect and that's okay. But here's what we did about, like that to me is so much more engaging than, right, sort, set in order, shine, standardize, sustain. And, it's like,
Yeah. Although there's that for the readers at the end of the book too, there's some links to sort of extra items that came in at the end or didn't quite fit into the book. And so I do have a link to some extra history on 5S for those who are interested. But yes, awesome. No, this story is about people-centered leadership and how do you create a culture of learning and what does that mean for both individuals and organizations. And this isn't a story about a perfect person or a perfect organization either. So there's a lot of failure and mistakes and the richness of learning that happens through that. So, which is, I think, really, I found really helpful for myself because sometimes we can put Toyota on a pedestal or other leaders. And, we all have our own learning experiences and things that where we stumble and fall and have to get up and learn. And so I think it just makes it more relatable than having sort of like the end states all shiny and wonderful, but like what's actually the process to get there on the bumpy road.
Right. And that's so true because, you look on, like my wife and I will talk about the Instagram life, especially now through COVID-19, nobody's really doing much of anything, although there are over where we are in the East Coast, things have started to open up. So people are going on vacations and stuff like that, and you see it in the news feed. And even before COVID, you always see like, hey, we're at the beach and it's like this, it's like perfect blue water and like the whole, and it's like, and then you scroll down and the next person's doing something fun. And I sometimes think that lean kind of has that connotation too, sometimes on social media where it's like, hey, you see a picture or some video and it's like the picture perfect, Kanban system or visual management board. And then we have clients that will see stuff like that. And then they go out on their floor and they're like, man, it doesn't look like that here. And I'm like, yeah, well, these people have been at it for 10 years and you're only seeing that one cell. And trust me when I tell you, they have 100 other cells and they're nowhere near, So I think there is something to that too sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. And also like, from a leadership perspective too, that like these are habits that we create and culture is like the accumulation of habits and there's things that aren't working as well. And so how do we build those habits over time? And sometimes I think people expect like a switch to be flipped in their organization. Like all of a sudden, magically, we're going to have like this wonderful management system and everyone's going to be a problem solver. And so not just from the tools and the sort of more technical lean concepts, but also just from a behavior standpoint. But it is possible to change. And I think Mr. Yoshino's experience of working with the Numi factory that was the joint venture between Toyota and GM in the 1980s. And actually at that time, he was responsible for the training program of the Americans who were coming over to Japan to learn the Toyota way, to learn the Toyota production system. And John Shook he hired John Shook, and John Shook was his subordinate at that time. And that was sort of how John's journey at Toyota started. And but I think it does show that in a year or a few years, a culture can shift, but it has to be intentional and not forced, but also be patient and the amount of effort and I guess nurturing and cultivation it takes to help develop that is really important. And later in the book, I won't spoil it for you, don't worry, Paul, but there's a contrast there's a contrasting story and experience that Mr. Yoshino had in the last decade of his career that really is a stark contrast to the NUMMI experience. And so I think it's a nice offering of of changing a culture that went well, and then an attempt to change a culture that didn't go as successfully, and sort of the factors that impacted both of those.
Nice. And that's cool. I did not know that about him. I mean, I know the NUMMI story as I got my start in automotive, and we were supplier to Toyota. That's kind of how I got my first taste of lean, and that's kind of what drew me to it. And then obviously, I know the NUMMI story, as a lot of people do. I did not know that he was part of that. That's way cool.
Yeah, he was the man, or the person, or they were all men back then, but the person in charge of creating and managing that 3-week learning program. So multiple cohorts would come from the United States and really be that foundational learning experience for when they would then go back to the NUMMI plant and then be implementing what they learned. So yes, Mr. Yoshino, he has been involved. He's not like the most famous, he's not Mr. Cho, and he even said he's not the sort of the name you might know, but he was involved in so many important inflection points in Toyota's history, and really intimately involved in them. And so his experiences, almost more like behind the scenes, his experiences really have this richness that I was like, we have to capture this. We need to bring this forward, this knowledge, and both from a historical standpoint, but also just from almost like he's almost more tangible, like a person like you or me or someone else we're maybe not the president of this massive international company, but we were playing important leadership or influencer roles in our organizations. And what does that look like? And how do you influence from the middle? And how do you coach and develop maybe more senior leaders who are more senior than you are? And how do you take on more responsibility from the beginning part of your career all the way to a much more senior level as well?
Right. Yeah. How do you manage a job? Right. And I think that's great. And again, I mean, I'm so happy that you recognize that and decided to write this book, because I mean, we all know Shigeo Shingo and Taiichi Ono. I mean, we could quote, as lean practitioners, most of us could probably quote chapter and verse, right? But there's so many other folks like Yoshino that, we need to know those stories too, because we always say, lean failure is a whole pet peeve of mine. We don't have time to talk about that now. Next time we will. But when we talk about those kinds of things, we look at the people who are we say, well, here's what you do about it. And it has to be led from the top. And that's like a comment, right? Well, and that's all true. It's all true. But there's a middle part too. And what parts do the middle parts play? And I think it's so important to shed some light on that, because, I just don't know if we do that enough and talk about that enough.
Yeah, for sure. And for a lot of you'll see that Toyota did lead from the top, set a clear intention. And there were very important players throughout the whole spectrum that helped contribute to the outcomes and that we saw. So yes.
Right. And because it has to be, right? I mean, I don't know, look at the Eiffel Tower. It's well, it's named after one guy, but one guy didn't build the whole thing. It's well, what are the stories of the people who went to work there every day? Maybe it's just me, but that's the stuff.
That's what this is. This is
good.
Yes, that's what this is. So I can't wait to talk with you, Paul, once you've read the book. Maybe we can set up another time and have a little debrief on what are the things that really stood out to you, having read the different experiences.
Challenge accepted. So I said, I just got to get through this one other one with our oldest. So I like to chat a little bit about maybe some things that other lean podcasts maybe don't chat about. So what I'm really interested, so if you could give us the dime tour of your background. Now, I know you've lived in a lot of places, you've done a bunch of things. Could you run us through that just briefly? And what I'm really interested to know is, why lean? What drove you this way? How did you wind up where you are?
Yeah, I think it's when you set out on your career, you don't necessarily expect where it's going to go. I certainly would not have anticipated that, almost 25 years after graduating from college, I'd be doing what I'm doing. I had this vision that I was going to be an academic researcher. I had graduated with a degree in interest in healthcare policy and actually worked in academia for many years at the University of California, San Francisco. And then was awarded a Fulbright scholarship to go live in Australia, and where I pursued my master's degree in public health. And so I'm giving you the short story here. I've always had a really strong desire to experience other cultures. And I think that's something that's really connected me and Mr. Yoshino as well. As you will discover, and I'm not spoiling anything, because this is an introduction, that there's this concept of warp and weft. And I'm pointing to the cover because this is graphically represents this, that the warp threads when you're weaving something are sort of the strong known forces and factors in your life. And then you incorporate and weave through all these other elements that you discover along the way. And so like Mr. Yoshino, my warp threads really have always been a strong desire to experience other cultures. I was an exchange student in both high school and in college. I moved to London and worked at Planet Hollywood. I was Katie from California for a year and a half, and then moved to Australia. And but where my pivot came and where I got interested in lean was when I returned. So then I transitioned away from academia. There were things I really love about academia, and actually the things that I loved were the deeper thinking and the synthesis. And so I think that's what also drove me to, or some of the excitement to write a book and put something together. I was a qualitative researcher and had done a lot of interviews for my thesis. And then I went to healthcare consulting. And when I returned to the United States, I took a position at Stanford Children's Hospital and in the performance improvement department. And at that point, we were just a small group of great problem solvers and thinkers who didn't have a methodology, but we were just deployed out into the organization to help solve the problems. And I loved it. I love solving problems. I felt really connected to still this connection to healthcare, where my passion of what I'd studied for 10 years and learning hospital operations. And what I got interested in lean, we did a 5S project in one nursing unit. So I was intrigued by that, and I started reading more things, and I liked how it was about engaging people for solving the problems, and a rapid process improvement workshop. And I kind of pulled for more training from my boss, and he was excited for that as well. So I had the great opportunity of sort of being the first person in our group to be trained up and doing things. And I loved how it, a rapid process improvement or Kaizen workshop pulled together the people who touched the work to solve the problems. And I got really passionate about that. I was at Stanford Children's for almost 6 years, and sort of my lean journey mirrored the organization's lean journey. We kind of, a few years in, realized that the performance improvement department needed not to be the problem solvers, but we needed to be the coach of the problem solvers. And so it was a nice evolution, but really what got me into it was taking this position in a hospital and really trying to help solve problems. And we had this great connection with some consultants from Seattle, and we learned a lot from there. And then from then I took on another more senior role in another healthcare organization. And from there, started my own consulting practice and moved to Japan. And so that, fast forward now 6 years ahead. But really, to me, it was the connection of helping people solve the problems that they touched, and how they really improved the lives and experience of patients. That was clear. So good segue. Would you say that's your inspiration? My inspiration for what?
Well, is that what drives you to do what it is you do? Is it like, if I said, what's the one thing? Is you think that's the one thing? Just helping people use this process and these tools, strategy to make life better?
Yeah, well, that would be one element of it. I would say I define my purpose now is to really help people to both live and lead with intention. And to me, that's about defining their own purpose and then aligning their behaviors to achieve that purpose. And it could be from an organizational perspective as well. And certainly, I'm so enriched with the thinking and practice that comes from Lean and Toyota. and bringing that in to help solve problems and help people fulfill their purpose. But I'd say it's broader than just implementing or teaching lean. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because I'm always interested, it's like, I mean, I'm a degree mechanical engineer, so I come at it from that perspective. But at the same, I think, but that's part of why I mean, honestly, that's part of why I started doing the podcast, is so I could open these kinds of conversations up so people can understand, like, because, people will see us online. They'll see us, we'll post something on LinkedIn or whatever, and they'll say, oh, yeah, I read that article or the blog post and I liked it or I didn't like it. And it's like, geez, sometimes I think it's hard to to get some context unless you're really follow somebody religiously or a part of a group. Like I know you, Karen Ross, have a coaching group that you do. But I'm always interested, like, what is it about lean or organizational, or continuous improvement in particular, like that drives people, and that's why I ask, I'm always curious, because some people are more tools based, some people are more strategy based, and I'm always curious to understand why.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I would say it really is about, the original spark that got me excited was both solving a real operational problem impacting, patients or customers, but also helping people create the joy in their work and to solve the problems and make it easier and to help them not only improve themselves, but improve their work and the experience, and really connecting and reconnecting with the purpose that they have in life and at work as well, and how to fulfill that.
And I'm glad you said that, because I talk about that not as much as I want to, but I try to weave it in. I talk about teachers are teachers because that's what they want to do. Same nurses, engineers. Pick them, right? Although I don't know why anybody wants to be an accountant, because that seems like super boring. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah,
no offense to any accountants.
You're not meant to be an accountant. It could be there's some people that could be very fulfilling for. So.
I understand completely. I just but I just from when I talk continuous improvement or lean, and it's like, we all chose those careers because that's what gives us that intrinsic value, right? And that's what brings us joy. It brings us joy. And that's for me, one of my favorite parts is when we can solve problems so people can get back to doing what they really love to do. And you just see the fire come back, and it's like, because nobody wants to go to work. I don't believe anybody wants to go to work and just, be looking for tools that they need, and it's not where they need them, or information. There's a story I tell. My dad had open heart surgery. It was a few years ago now. And in the days leading up to his surgery, he's, obviously in the hospital, and they're kind of getting him ready. And nurses are coming in like every hour or two. And they'll come in with the cart, and then they hook him up to this, that, and the other thing, and they're doing different things. Katie, almost every single time, another nurse would come in to his room, have nothing to do with my dad. They're looking on the cart, because the cart that they have doesn't have what they need. It's out. It's something. And I'm like, and over the course of a few days, I'm like watching this, and my head's exploding. I'm like, and most of all, it was the frustration on the nurse's part, because, they're just like aggravated because they've got this whole wing is nothing but people who are awaiting heart surgery. So it's like, there's more important things to be doing than looking for this stupid thing, that I need right now. I should be helping my patient, but I'm not. And, you can just feel the tension, and they're doing the best that they can with what they got. So I don't know. I tell that story a lot. For me, that's, like kind of what you were talking about, where people get back to their passion.
Yeah. Yes. That's super common.
Yeah. And I don't know. I guess that's why we do what we do, right? So we're out there trying to fix all this stuff.
Yeah.
So I like to take a little break from the podcast and just do what I'm will affectionately refer to as the wicked fun part, because I'm a Mainer, right? Yeah. So it's wicked everything. So are you up for this?
Sure.
All right. So for you specifically, I have 10 would you rather questions.
Oh, and I told you my son, my 9-year-old loves this game. So I'm an expert every day.
All right. Now I will tell anybody watching or listening, I did not send Katie these ahead of
No,
time.
he just said we might play this game. I just only got the warning about the game, not about the content. All right.
Right, but I assure you it's all above board.
All
right. All right, here we go.
Yes.
Would you rather lose the ability to read or lose the ability to speak?
Oh, God, lose the ability to read. I say that painfully, but.
Okay. Would you rather be in jail for a year or lose a year off of your life?
I'd be in jail for a year.
Okay. Would you rather have all the traffic lights you approach be green or never have to stand in line again? It's a good one for a lean practitioner.
I would prefer never have to stand in line again.
Agreed.
Although you could probably say that being at a red light is like standing in line. So it's a little,
it's.
I know. It's all right. All right. We'll go in. Don't argue with the question.
No, it's okay. It's all right. That's why I picked that one. I'm like, I got to ask Katie this one. Would you rather have an easy job working for someone else or work for yourself but work incredibly hard?
Work for yourself but incredibly hard.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that. I would too.
I've chosen that.
Would you rather be a character in the last movie you saw or a character in the last book you read?
Character in the last book I read.
Would you rather never get angry or never be envious?
I'd rather never be envious.
Me too. Would you rather go to the moon or to Mars?
Oh, I get asked this one all the time. I would rather go to the moon.
Yeah?
I think so. I don't know. It's a tough one. I'm just gonna it varies. It's really hot where I am right now. So the idea of going to Mars is really not appealing. So I'm feeling you're asking me on a hot day. So
fair. That's fair. Would you rather live in a cave or a treehouse?
Treehouse.
Would you rather have a bottomless box of Legos or a bottomless gas tank?
Bottomless gas tank. I already have a bottomless box of Legos.
I think every lead practitioner does. And my kids get into them.
I'm not a lead practitioner. That's called, I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old who are with Legos.
That too. Although I find, I'll go into my, because I do the Lego simulation, and I'll go into my bags and I'll be like, what and I'll go upstairs and, same thing. Well, I was short a few, 100. I'm like, let's see, last one. Would you rather move to Japan for the rest of your life or write another book?
Move to Japan.
Nice.
My husband dream about splitting our time in Japan again. We love Japan. And I'm so sad not to be, I had my 2 sold out Japan trips this year. And with COVID, obviously we had to cancel them. And so I'm really missing being in Japan right now, but another day.
Yeah. And so good answers. Thank you for playing along.
There are no wrong answers. Thank you.
So I wanted to add a little bit more about the book again. So I've only co-authored a book. So in other words, I wrote 1 chapter and I did that years ago because I wanted to see what it felt like. And it was hard. And that was only 1 chapter. And like I said, this, like yours, is big. It's substantial, which I love. I think it's great.
Yeah.
What was that process like?
Oh man, it was a big learning process. And so if I do write another book, I've learned a lot. This came about probably not quite, somewhere between 2.5 and 3 years ago. Mr. Yoshino and I were starting to chat about how people really enjoyed reading my blog posts. I got a lot of feedback and comments about my blog post that the blog I'd started writing when I moved to Japan in 2015, and in particular, the conversations and reflections that I had from Mr. Yoshino. And he sort of jokingly said, oh, we should put together a booklet and maybe just sort of build on your, a compilation of your blog posts. And I was like, yeah, maybe, but I kind of knew that a booklet was, going going to turn into something more. And I was like, well, no, let's make this be a book. Like, you have some stories to share. And so we started off actually as a partnership, thinking it was going to be co-authorship. But through the process, so we always knew it was going to be me really who was writing the book, but him contributing, and which is very much how the partnership came out. But in terms of really, it became a much bigger book than a booklet. And so we agreed that it made more sense for really, he's the subject and I'm the author, but we really did create it in partnership. And it was started with some really intentional interviews. And I went back to old blog posts, but I realized those were written kind of like a bloggy kind of way. And that I had this vision, and I talk about this in the preface, but about how I had this, we kind of thought it would be, maybe like 10 topics and then telling some stories in between there. And when I went to write, I just felt like I was getting bored. I'm like, I don't know, we don't need another lean book about what does humility mean or what does Goda Gemba mean, and like important concepts, but I'm like, they've already been written. Like, how much more new stuff could I say? And also what I was challenged by is that, and we all have our own experience of this, that often there's not just one sort of lesson that comes from an experience, especially one that's more than just a small vignette, but like maybe a complex situation that's multi-month or multi-year. And so I was trying to like fit stories in between all different topics, and it just was getting fragmented. And it was last summer, I just had this realization that I needed and wanted to tell his learning journey and really tell it chronologically, how it unfolded for him. And then once I got started writing that way, it became clear too that there was like more in some of these stories. So like we were talking weekly or every other week. I mean, for the last 3 years, we've had a lot of conversations, and he would respond sometimes in email and sometimes a lot of our phone conversations, and I would transcribe them and make notes, but really thinking about, how could I tell someone's learning journey? And the structure sort of evolved as I was writing it, and I started to see it happening sort of like a few parts, like his early, as of the structure, like sort of telling his journey from like a personal perspective of following a really clear goal, which is moving to the United States, and those were his warp threads, and that became the framework for telling the whole fabric of the story, of the experience. And then sort of segmenting his career into 3 parts, sort of really when he was like just really learning to lead. Another section where then he was really leading to help others learn. And then this whole the last section, which is a experience about failure and learning from failure. And it just got more clear. And then I also wanted the book to be able to appeal to other people who might not be entrenched in the lean world. And so I knew I needed to include maybe some boxes or some enough context of information. I'm not going deep necessarily into a technical topic, but enough to tell people what it meant so that they could understand the context of the story. So, but man, it was at AME. So when we met last November in person, last time we were there together, I was just wrapping up the first like full manuscript of sort of what this was, and then got feedback from some beta readers. And then John Shook also read the book, and in the spring gave me some interesting feedback that helped me like kind of reframe and rethink some components. And then I also knew that there was this last chapter, this last experience, like it still wasn't making sense to me. And so we were diving deeper, even in the last like 4 to 5 months, about what this experience was. So it really was this sort of multi-revision process and unfolding together. But I'm happy with where it's at. And he kept remembering some new things, even like up to a month ago. And I was like, no more, we can't have more. So there'll be future blog posts.
Right.
Place and time out. So,
right.
But we really worked in partnership. So even though I'm the author and he's the subject, we developed this in partnership. He's read every single word of this book many times. He's approved of every single word and contributed to, I quote him directly throughout, or, some of it's I've shaped his language to fit, but he's approved of everything. And so it really was this point of collaboration, but I was the one who was really figuring out how to structure it, how to tell the stories, and asking him the questions to pull out the reflections and the thinking. Gotcha. And I'm so honored that he opened himself up to me and was willing to share these stories and experiences with others as well.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, it's important. It's important. I mean, it is. It's important that we hear those stories because, like we were talking, I mean, I think we all know the rules of how to, right, go about doing this stuff. But yeah, I think it's more important to hear, like you said, the chronology of, hey, listen, you're going to stub your toe and you're going to fall down, and that's okay. Right.
Yeah.
And here are some right real life examples of how I did that. And here's what happened. And it's going to get messy and it's dirty and it's ugly sometimes, but it's kind of like all part of the process.
Yeah, and I so the whole Daruma concept that you and I've talked about, and I imported all these Darumas, hoping I was giving away to all these in-person events. But I'm glad you have yours behind you.
I do. It's here. It's right here.
Yay, little Darumas. But there's a proverb that says, "Fall down 7 times, get up 8." And these little Darumas, they write themselves up. And so it's the same way. We're always going to fall down. We might have a goal and what we want to achieve, but we're gonna fall down. But it's about how do you persevere and keep getting up and keep trying and keeping your eye on that goal, but also knowing that you may have to adjust and you may have to rethink about how and persevere and fall down and learn from failure. So yeah.
Nice. Well, I think honestly, that's a great place to stop. My last question was gonna be, what's maybe one thought that you wanted to share with everybody? And I think you just nailed it.
Perfect. Keep going.
Yeah. So thank you, Katie, again, so much. And like I said, I cannot wait to read this thing. Hopefully I can get this through it before I get a bunch of spoilers on LinkedIn or Twitter or something that somebody, right, if there's a twist at the end that nobody knows about yet. Right? So I don't want to, so I'll definitely get it. And definitely I'll reach out once I do that. We can hop back on and chat some more.
Great. Thanks so much for listening, Paul.
Sure. And then one final thing too, and I'll put all this in the show notes, but if people want to get a hold of you or contact you, follow you, what's the best way?
Yep. So my handle on almost everything is KBJ Anderson, ANDERSON. My maiden name was Brian Jones, so KBJA are my initials. So kbjanderson.com, and then that's my Twitter handle and my LinkedIn handle as well. And then the book website also is just there's learningtolead.leadingtolearn.com. And so you can just go there as well for a bunch of resources and additional things about the book as well. So,
awesome.
Thank you.
I look forward to it. I hope everybody, like I said, I'll link out to it. I hope everybody gets a chance to go get it and check it out. So
yeah.
Until next time, Katie, again, thank you very much. It was nice to see you, even if we have to do it via virtual reality, instead of hanging out on the CN Tower, which, by the way, has a glass floor as part of it. So
another time we'll have to make it to Toronto. So
all right, fair enough.
Yeah.
We'll talk soon.
Bye. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. It's Paul. Before I let you go, I just want to say thanks for listening. I hope you found the podcast to be both entertaining and educational, as that's really what our goal is with it. If you did like it, please give us a review and a subscribe. The more folks who do this, the more the algorithms like us, so the more people will be able to find us. I also want to give special shout outs to Emma Critchley for her video and audio editing abilities, which quite frankly are way beyond mine, as well as Jeremy Grant and the team at the Timber Cross for their creative genius. I appreciate you all. I invite you to connect with us as well. We're all over social media, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, so we should be pretty easy to find. We share a lot of content that is much like what we talk about on the podcast, so it may be of interest to give us a follow. You can also find us online at newenglandlean.com. That's our website, and it outlines all the services we provide, things we do, customer testimonials, case studies, white papers, as well as being our main conduit for story sharing about all things that are lean, quality, and culture change focused. So check us out there as well. Finally, if you have any thoughts about the podcast, things you'd like us to discuss, things you'd like us to change, or if you want to be a guest or know somebody who would be, please email us at podcast@newenglandlean.com. We're always trying to improve and welcome any feedback. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, make it a wonderful week.